Minutes from now, Joe Biden will hold his first presidential press conference. The president is expected to face tough questions on the migrant crisis unfolding in the country and on the gun laws in the aftermath of the two mass shootings. He is also expected to lay out a new goal for U.S. vaccinations against COVID-19. Biden's popularity has remained high in his first 2 months in office, after a $1.9 trillion stimulus package passed and millions were inoculated against COVID-19. A Reuters Ipsos poll shows that 59% of adults in the United States approve of Biden's overall job performance. It's been over 50 days since Biden took office, making him the longest new president to have gone without meeting the press in 100 years. By this point in their presidencies, both former presidents Trump and Obama had held their first press conferences. This comes as Biden is currently on a multi-state tour to promote his $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. Our correspondent Susan Teherani has been tracking the very latest, is now joining us live from New York for more on these developments. Susan, what's expected from this press conference? We're looking at how this is a much anticipated briefing, a meet with the press on part of Joe Biden, a long delay also when it comes to the track records of his predecessors.
Absolutely, Molly. You know, some critics have argued that the White House has been shielding the president from this solo press conference, and the White House has really pushed back on that, saying that he has been so busy with numerous issues on his agenda that he wanted to get the most possible issues resolved during his time as president and then come and address the American people. Unprecedented indeed. And one of the issues with waiting so long with anything is that the expectations are now so high, and the expectations for him to perform as president and the press to really, you know, go out and ask him the tough pressing questions that the American public want answers to is also not being unnoticed either. We're expecting a few key issues for the president to address. As you mentioned, COVID on the top agenda. He will be talking about possibly tensions with international rivals. He will also be talking about gun violence issues in the United States, considering recent developments in the past week. And he will be talking about the immigration issue that's really plagued his first part of his administration's term, so to say.
Right, let's also talk about the mounting pressure on Joe Biden when it comes to the migrant crisis. The Republicans, of course, have not wasted any opportunity to attack him over this surge in migrants that we are witnessing at the borders. Also, those images that we saw just yesterday from inside one Texas overflow facility, which give us an idea of the conditions inside the facility and cause many to raise eyebrows over what stance the government will be taking.
Yeah, it's not just Republicans, by the way. The first images that leaked because the Biden administration and the White House would not let media or any form of camera into any of these facilities and really provided a blackout for the American public to see what's really going on during the border crisis, came out on the part of a Democratic official who shared photos with Axios, and we saw horrific conditions that really violated human rights norms on the part of the Biden administration in really putting minors into these facilities and overcrowding them as they slept on top of one another with lights on 24 hours a day. What the facility that the Biden administration took these VIPs White House officials and members of Congress on a tour with was called an aspirational facility. It was, believe it or not, one of the more, not to say better, but cleaner facilities, because it's a secondary facility, which means that you go to one facility, for example, that's located in a place called Donna, Texas, which is the main facility, which is notorious for overcrowding, which has about 500% the capacity that it's supposed to have. And then some of those individuals are then sent to secondary facilities, the ones that these officials visited to, which are sort of makeshift camps, so to say. And then in these facilities, then they are, after that, released into communities. So that was the facility that we saw. About 10 to 20% of those minors have been infected with COVID. We had about 1,000 minors in those facilities. They don't have access to clean drinking water because mainly that facility was built on a oil field, and it was a rest stop for oil field workers, and the water that was being used there was basically for the bathroom and not for other means, and it wasn't sanitary. So they're running out of food and water, and the images that we saw were provided by one camera crew, and the rest of the images that we're seeing, albeit horrific, are provided by the Biden administration itself. So it's somewhat of state-provided footage that we're seeing. This is why there is such an outcry right now. So we're going to be witnessing a lot of questions about transparency on the part of this administration, because that's what the American people were promised. And also whether or not, you know, at the end of the day, what will be done to curb this crisis that we're witnessing right now. I think that's the most important thing, to put the blame game away at this point and move forward to see what can be done to take the burden off the Border Patrol, the NGOs who cannot provide for these migrants, for these vulnerable communities who have been promised that they'll have a better life if they cross the border, and to really halt the very sophisticated trafficking that we're seeing on the part of the cartels that's being carried out right now, possibly the only industry that's thriving out of all of this.
Right. Many have also questioned the need to hold a press conference right now. They're wondering why the president has decided to finally now take the podium and address his first press conference.
Absolutely. You know, 64 days for a candidate Biden who really put his candidacy on the fact that I am the president for all Americans. I will be transparent. I will not hide anything from you. And that's not saying that he has. It's just that when you make those promises, and he was making those promises regarding the facts and figures regarding COVID, because, you know, his campaign was always very COVID-centric. And for that president to wait out more than any other president in the last century or so to come out and really talk to the American people and the public about what he's been doing is somewhat striking. And, you know, critics will argue that it's because he's prone to blunders and gaps, and the White House has been shielding him, and everything is always very cookie cutter when it comes to having Biden in front of the media or the American people, and he always has to be very scripted with the teleprompter. But on the other hand, I think the American people are a lot more forgiving that those critics give them credit for. And I think it was a shortcoming on the part of the White House to really not come out in a more transparent fashion and share its ideas with the American people sooner than to really raise expectations and come out after 64 days with so much issues to cover in one press conference. So yeah, it's been a long time. There are a lot of issues to cover, and one of those issues will definitely be focusing on not just this immigration issue, which the Biden administration hoped would have taken a backseat, the border crisis, because it was hoping to focus on the success of its $1.9 trillion stimulus package moving forward into the 2020 midterm elections in a hope to hang on to both the Senate and the House, but also it will also focus on the issue of gun violence and moving forward with legislation on whether or not they'll be able to sort of reach a deal with the Republicans on, some sort of legislation to curb the ongoing violence. And with what we saw with really not having unity, so to say, regarding the $1.9 trillion stimulus package, and then the infighting that's going on with the border crisis, gun violence issues, gun legislation at this point, it's not going to be very promising. So Biden's challenge with this press conference is going to be answering tough questions, but it's also going to be able, as he promised, to try to bring the American people together. I mean, as cliche as that sounds, at one point he has to bring both sides together to get things done. I mean, you can go so far with executive orders and taking advantage of majority in the House.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.